Rhea Juno knelt low behind the skeletal remains of an old starship, its hull jagged and torn by the wrath of 100 storms. The acrid scent of burnt ozone lingered in the air, mixing with the stale, metallic tang of scorched earth. The winds howled across Tarsus' war-ravaged surface, dragging dust and debris through the wasteland. Above, the planet's darkened sky rumbled with the promise of another violent storm. No place was safe on this cursed world. Not even here. Rhea's pulse rifle, battered and worn from years of combat, felt heavy in her hands. The weapon was a constant reminder of what she'd lost, the last link to the military she once led, to the family she'd watched die in the Thaas bloody advance. A warrior by nature, a leader by necessity. Yet, today, she was something else, a desperate woman with no choice but to fight. She glanced over her shoulder. Her ragtag team, no more than a handful of survivors, crouched behind various scraps of wreckage, eyes wide, hands shaking. Each one bore the scars of this hellish world, some physical, others invisible. They were all that remained. 5 minutes, she muttered under her breath, barely audible over the gusts of wind. Her team had no more time to waste. She stood, offering a nod to her second-in-command, Ilian. Ilian, tall and lean with eyes that had seen too many horrors for one lifetime, looked up from the map he was scanning. "The Thaw will be at the ridge by dawn," he said, his voice low, clipped. "Are we sure we're ready for this?" Rhea stared at the horizon, where the faint outline of the Thaw stronghold could be seen, looming over the barren landscape like an iron fist. It would be their final stand. The plan was reckless, and they had little chance of success, but there was no other option. "Ready or not, we've come this far," Rhea replied, her tone hard as stone. "They're expecting us to break before we get there." "They're wrong." Behind her, the sound of shifting armor and murmured conversations filled the air. Some of her soldiers, more like survivors now, looked to her, waiting for the order. It wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about something deeper. Revenge, justice, a chance to show the Thaw that humans weren't just animals to be slaughtered. The Deathworlders would fight back. Her fingers tightened on the pulse rifle, the cold metal pressing into her palm. She could still feel the weight of her last battle, the way her men had fallen one by one, the fire and fury of their final stand. They had given everything. Now, it was her turn to finish what they had started. "Get into position," she commanded. "We move out in 5. The rebels scattered, swiftly and silently taking up positions in the remnants of old military equipment. Rhea turned to Ilian once more, her gaze unwavering. "I need a full sweep of the southern approach. I don't want any surprises." Ilian nodded, already moving, his tall frame disappearing into the shadows. He knew the stakes as well as she did. But there was something else in his eyes, a glimmer of doubt. Rhea wasn't blind to it. She had seen the questioning looks, heard the subtle grumbles among the group. They were tired, exhausted from constant battle, and many weren't sure if the war was worth it anymore. Was revenge worth their lives? Was it worth the endless cycle of violence? Rhea didn't have the answers. All she knew was that she couldn't stop. If she did, everything they had fought for would be in vain. As her team moved into formation, she couldn't shake the weight of the decisions that had brought them here. She had once been a commander, decisive, unflinching. Now, she was just a leader of broken people, her vision clouded by grief. "We're good to go, Captain," came the voice of Lena, a sniper who had survived the last ambush with little more than a broken arm and a stubborn will. She peered through a scope, scanning the horizon for movement. Rhea nodded, her eyes shifting toward the ridge where the Thaw would likely strike first. They had no advantage here. The terrain was their enemy as much as the alien forces. Tarsus, with its constant storms and shifting weather patterns, was unforgiving to anyone who wasn't born to fight. "Everyone, on my mark, move fast and quiet," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "We can't afford to let them know we're coming." The rebels nodded in unison, the quiet before the storm pressing in around them. Rhea checked the weapon's charge, then slung it over her shoulder. Her mind raced through the plan again, not allowing herself the luxury of doubt. "Move out," she shouted, voice strong. They crept forward, their boots crunching on the dirt as they advanced through the wreckage. Every step was calculated, every breath held. The storm clouds above began to churn faster, heavy with electricity, darkening the sky. The planet itself seemed to resent their presence. Or maybe it was just Rhea's paranoia. A few minutes into the march, an explosion tore through the silence. A blast of light from the ridge caught Rhea's eye just in time to hear the sharp crack of gunfire. Her heart skipped a beat. The ambush had already begun. Damn it, she swore under her breath. She had hoped for a quiet approach, no such luck. The Thaw were never caught off guard. "Get down," she shouted, diving into the wreckage herself, pulling Lena and the others to safety as incoming rounds pelted the ground. Her mind raced, calculating their next move in the span of a heartbeat. They were exposed, no cover from the direct assault. "Split up," she barked. "Take the eastern flanks. I'll lead the charge through the center." The rebels responded instantly, scattering in every direction. Rhea didn't wait to see if they would survive. She sprinted forward, pulse rifle raised, adrenaline flooding her veins. Her blood ran hot, familiar. The old instincts surged through her as the chaos erupted around her. She didn't look back. Not once. The rebels fought with the ferocity of people who had nothing left to lose, weapons blazing as they advanced. Rhea's heart pounded in her chest, each step carrying her closer to the Thaw stronghold and the bloody reckoning that awaited. Through the din of gunfire and explosions, a voice crackled through her comms. "Alien. Rhea, the ridge is clear. Moving in." "Good," Rhea responded, though she wasn't sure if it was good at all. "Stay sharp. We've got one shot at this." The final battle had begun. And there would be no turning back. The dust from the skirmish still hung thick in the air, stinging Rhea's eyes as she crouched beside a fallen communications tower. The acrid smell of burning flesh and scorched earth had long since mingled with the stale scent of human sweat. Her team had made it through the ambush, but it hadn't come without a cost. Lena's arm was in a makeshift sling, her eyes narrowed in quiet pain as she scanned the horizon with her rifle. Rhea didn't have time to check on everyone, she couldn't afford to. "All clear," Alien said, his voice steady despite the tension radiating from his every movement. He wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his hand and adjusted the long-range scanner. "The Thaw won't be back for a few hours, but we've got little time. They're aware we're here now." Rhea nodded, keeping her focus on the map spread across the dirt at her feet. It was worn, edges frayed, but it was the only thing standing between her and complete chaos. Tarsus wasn't just a hostile world, it was a world that wanted to kill you in more ways than one. The weather, the terrain, and, now, the Thaw. There was no room for mistakes. "Alien, we can't delay. We push forward, now." He hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough for Rhea to catch the subtle shift in his posture. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice low but cutting through the thick air between them. Rhea's gaze lifted from the map, locking eyes with him. There was concern in his expression, something deeper than the usual battlefield weariness. He was questioning her, and not for the first time. "We're not just fighting to survive anymore," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "This is about showing them who we are, what we're capable of. The Thaw underestimated us once. I'll be damned if they do it again." Alien exhaled sharply, looking away. He didn't disagree, but there was something in the way he clenched his jaw that told Rhea he didn't like the recklessness of it all. He was a strategist, the kind of person who saw 1,000 moves ahead. She was a soldier, driven by the heat of the moment, the need for immediate action. Together, they made a dangerous pair. "We'll follow your lead," Alien finally muttered. "But I don't like where this is heading." "I don't like it either, but it's the only way," Rhea said, and that was all the reassurance he would get. The team was moving now, each member settling into their role, the weight of their survival pressing down on their shoulders. Rhea could feel it too, the bone-deep exhaustion, the constant gnawing sense of dread. But they had come too far to back out now. They advanced in tight formation, moving through the broken landscape, the wind whipping around them like a living thing, biting at exposed skin. The sound of distant artillery fire echoed in the distance, a reminder of the storm that was brewing. It wasn't just the thaw they had to worry about, it was the planet itself. Tarsus was a nightmare, a place that didn't care if you were human or alien. It just wanted to kill you. Incoming, Lena's voice crackled through the comms, her tone tight with warning. A thaw scout patrol, coming in fast. They'll be on us in 5 minutes. Rhea swore under her breath. They couldn't afford another fight, especially not with the clock ticking down to the final assault on the thaw base. Ilian, you take the high ground with Lena. Use the terrain. Keep them distracted, Rhea ordered, her voice sharp with authority. I'll handle the front. Ilian nodded without a word, signaling to Lena. The two moved off, blending into the shadows of the ravaged landscape, disappearing as quickly as they had come. Rhea watched them go, her fingers tightening around the grip of her pulse rifle. It was a moment of rare silence before the storm, the calm before the storm of violence that would consume them all. She breathed deep, willing her mind to stay clear. The faint hum of approaching thaw vehicles filled the air, getting louder, closer. She could almost taste the heat of their weapons already, the way the pulse of their fire would sear through the air, cutting down anything that wasn't fast enough to get out of the way. The first shots rang out, high-pitched and deadly, as Ilian and Lena opened fire from their elevated position. The thaw responded quickly, returning fire with precision. The rebel forces had trained under fire, but they had never faced the thaw elite soldiers up close. They didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. It was a deadly dance of destruction, and they had no intention of losing. Rhea pushed forward, moving low through the broken terrain, her rifle raised, ready. As she rounded a corner of a shattered building, a thaw soldier appeared before her. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The alien's eyes, black as oil, narrowed, his bladed hand reaching for his weapon. Rhea didn't wait. She fired first. The pulse of energy ripped through the air, striking the alien dead center in the chest. He collapsed in a heap, a hiss of gas escaping his exoskeleton. She didn't pause. She didn't look at him. The fight was still ongoing. There was no room for sentiment. Target down, she muttered to herself, moving forward again, keeping low. She could hear the crackle of enemy communications through the static in her earpiece, the desperation in their voices as they tried to regroup. It wasn't going to happen. Not today. Rhea dropped behind a pile of rubble, her eyes scanning the area. She could feel the vibrations of enemy footsteps before she saw the soldiers. They were coming from all sides, forcing her into a tight corner. She gritted her teeth, knowing she had one shot at this. Lena, get ready to cover me, she said into her comms, already making her move. The sniper's voice responded almost instantly. On your 6, Captain. Rhea took a deep breath and charged. The thaw soldiers, caught off guard by the sudden assault, tried to react too late. Pulse fire lit up the darkness, streaking through the air. The air hummed with the deadly force of their energy weapons. She dove forward, rolling behind a large piece of debris just as a pulse round passed dangerously close to her head. She could hear Ilian's voice in her earpiece, calm, methodical. Enemy numbers are thinning. Push through, now. Push through or die, she muttered under her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. Another thaw soldier rounded the corner, his insectoid form towering over her. He hissed, raising his weapon, but Rhea was faster. She fired twice, both shots hitting him in the chest, and he crumpled to the ground, lifeless. With the area clear, she took a moment to catch her breath. Ilian's team was moving in from the high ground, their shots creating a barrier between her and any new threats. They were making progress, but it was slow. The thaw weren't going to let them have this fight so easily. Captain, it's time, Ilian's voice came through, steady as ever. Rhea looked at the map one last time, then at her team, battered but determined. Time for what? To end this. And with that, they moved out again, knowing that the next battle would decide everything. The Tha stronghold loomed in front of Rhea like a dark monolith, a jagged silhouette against the electric storms that raged overhead. Their final destination. It had taken everything, every ounce of strength, every breath, every sacrifice, to reach this point. And yet, it felt like they were only getting started. The air around them was charged, static buzzing in her ears. The winds howled, a constant reminder that they weren't alone on Tarsus. The planet itself seemed to sense the impending clash, as though it, too, was eager to see blood spilled. Rhea's fingers tightened on her pulse rifle, the weight of it grounding her in the chaos that threatened to swallow them whole. Her team was spread out behind her, their faces marked by the same grim determination that had driven them this far. They knew the odds, knew they were walking into a death trap, but they also knew there was no going back. How long until they realize we're here? Lena's voice crackled over the comms, her sniper's position high above, hidden in the wreckage of an old observation tower. Even from this distance, Rhea could hear the tension in her voice. "They know," Rhea replied. Her gaze was locked on the entrance to the stronghold, a series of massive reinforced gates that could withstand a full barrage of artillery. It was a fortress, built to last. Built to kill. But they had something the Tha hadn't counted on, human tenacity. They just don't know when we'll strike. The storm overhead raged harder, the sky splitting with flashes of blue and white as if the planet itself was preparing to unleash its fury. Rhea's pulse quickened, the familiar rush of combat settling into her veins. She didn't have the luxury of fear, there was only the fight, the enemy, and the objective. "We move out in 30 seconds, she said, her voice firm, giving no room for doubt. "Everyone knows their positions?" A chorus of affirmatives came through her earpiece. Alien, Lena, the rest of the squad, they were ready. Each of them had fought through hell to get here, and there would be no second chances. "On my mark," Rhea muttered, taking one last look at her team. They nodded, understanding without words. They had seen too many comrades fall, too many plans fail, but they had never been so close to their goal. This was it. The final push. "Mark," Rhea called, and the charge began. They moved as one, a coordinated strike that was both brutal and precise. The heavy winds masked the sound of their footsteps as they dashed toward the stronghold's gates, seeking any weak point, any opening. The Tha's automated defenses lit up in response, firing heavy plasma shots into the air, but they weren't fast enough. Rhea led her squad into the chaos, her rifle up and firing, taking out 2 guards before they even had time to react. "Stay focused," she shouted over the gunfire. "The goal is the control room, nothing else matters." The enemy was scrambling now, the heavy thud of their boots echoing as they closed in on the human attackers. The first wave was just a distraction. The real fight had begun, and Rhea felt it in every fiber of her being. The Tha were brutal, relentless, and efficient, but humans were something different. They fought with everything they had, and that had always been their edge. A series of explosions rocked the ground as Alien's team launched grenades from the high ground, sending Tha soldiers scattering in all directions. Rhea didn't waste a second. She surged forward, her rifle spewing bursts of deadly energy, each shot taking down one of the alien invaders with a flash of light. She moved like a force of nature, her body attuned to the rhythm of combat, no hesitation, no second thoughts. "Push, push, push!" Rhea yelled, urging her team forward. The gates were ahead, their massive structure covered in armor plating, but there was no time for subtlety. They needed speed, and they needed it now. The rest of the squad followed, sprinting to catch up with Rhea, their faces set in grim determination. They reached the gates within minutes, but it wasn't going to be easy. The entrance was sealed tight, and the Tha weren't about to let them waltz in without a fight. Rhea crouched low, taking cover behind a reinforced pillar as plasma fire rained down from above. She could hear Alien's voice in her ear, giving orders, coordinating the team's movements. "Lena, we need a clear shot." Rhea barked, peering over her cover and assessing the situation. The sniper was in position, but the angle was off. "Do you have eyes on the control room entrance?" "Affirmative," Lena responded, her voice calm despite the chaos. I have a shot at the command tower. Take it, Rhea ordered. Lena's rifle fired once, a sharp crack that rang through the air, followed by an explosion that shook the ground. A small section of the command tower exploded outward, exposing the control room's interior. It was their opening. Go, go, go! Rhea shouted, charging toward the now breached gate. The rest of the team followed, rushing in behind her, using the cover of the blast to advance. As they breached the gates, Rhea felt a surge of adrenaline flood her system. This was it, the final hurdle. Inside, the Tha command center buzzed with activity, alien soldiers scrambling to activate the final line of defense. But it was too late. Rhea's squad was already on them, cutting through the enemy with brutal precision. The battle was fast and furious. The Tha's control room was a maze of flickering lights and screens, the walls covered in strange alien symbols that pulsed with an unsettling glow. Rhea shot her way through, her eyes fixed on the central console at the far end of the room. She was almost there. Cover me, she shouted to Elian, who immediately took up a defensive position, gunning down any Tha soldiers who dared approach. Rhea made her way to the console, her fingers flying over the controls as she quickly accessed the system. She could hear the Tha forces rallying outside, their desperation growing as they realized they were being pushed back. There's no time to hack this, Rhea muttered under her breath. She drew a detonator from her belt and jammed it into the control panel, setting the timer for 30 seconds. This ends now. The countdown began. Everyone, fall back! Rhea shouted, grabbing Elian by the arm and pulling him toward the exit. The rest of the squad followed, moving quickly but carefully, knowing that the explosion would come without warning. As they reached the outer gates, Rhea glanced back, watching the Tha scrambling in the control room as the seconds ticked away. They were too late. The explosion rocked the stronghold, the shockwave sending Rhea and her team tumbling forward. The world seemed to freeze for a moment, the air thick with dust and smoke. Then the ground trembled, and the sound of the explosion echoed through the air like a death knell. Rhea stood, her breath heavy in her chest, and looked back at the burning remains of the Tha stronghold. They had done it. The base was gone, their enemy shattered. But as the smoke cleared, Rhea knew this was only one victory in a war that was far from over. Still, for today, for this moment, they had won. Let's go home, she said quietly, her voice full of resolve. The battle was over. But the war? It was just beginning.